This is Pending Reality, and today we're going to be going through how to convert your clone to a VRM so that you could use it in BUNSHIN Live. You can find the updated BUNSHIN terminal docs, which will go through this, but I will introduce it here just in case. It will introduce you to the toolkit, some points about how to get motion capture working if you're having any issues, importing your avatar. But today we're going to be running through the clone conversion process here. And shout out to Beb and Regis for creating Clone Tools 2.0, which makes the whole conversion process way easier than it was before. So, first of all, you're going to want to get Blender 3.2 or higher. Go ahead and go to the official Blender website. Go ahead and download it, get that ready. Once you do, you're going to want to install two plugins, and these are from the official Clone Tools team. So, one of them being Clone Tools and the other one being Clone Converter. What Clone Tools will do is take all of your zipped assets, throw them into one Blender project, and allow you to just start editing. Clone Converter allows you to optimize that project and make it really simple for you to just export out a VRM. And there's a few caveats that we're going to go through that are specific to Bunshing Live, but this does a lot of the heavy lifting. And then Bunshing Lives will take your Blender export as a VRM and make it run really smoothly. People might be asking, what in the world is a VRM? A VRM is basically a file format, kind of like a JPEG, MP4, MP3, but it's specific towards avatars pioneered from the Japanese market. So it's a way for you to have a really optimized 3D model, and its main point is that regardless of what application you're using, you can use the VRM and just import characters in and make it work in your game. And this is what it's all built out of. So now jumping into Blender, first thing we're going to do is the obligatory highlight everything and delete them out of existence. Now, once you have Blender installed and to get your plugins working, you go to Preferences, press Install here in the pop-up window, go to the directory. So in my case, it's in Blender Plugins and there's Clone Tools. I could say Install Add-on. I've already have them installed here. So Clone Tools, Clone Converter. Just make sure that these are installed. You just direct it to the directory that it's saved, make sure they're on. And if you want to make sure they're on, go to this right side over here, click this tool, and then you'll have this thing called Clone Tools and Clone Converter. So the next thing that we're going to do is you're going to want to click on the Clone Tools tab. Once you click on the Clone Tools tab, you're going to want to choose the gender that you want to load your character in. Open your clone files, go to the directory that you've saved them in. So in this run, I'm helping out a great educator in the space. His name is MetaMike. Shout out to MetaMike. Has a lot of great documentation about avatar interoperability in the space, regardless of what platform you're wanting to use your virtual identity on. So the important thing is you're going to want to go to a directory where you have all the zip files with all of the different parts that make up your clone. Select the location, load it in. Then bam, you should basically get your character in. Sometimes parts might be missing, but we'll cover that in a second. First thing what you're going to want to do is probably turn off the ray tracing, path tracing, and just turn it to viewport shading mode. So now that everything is imported in, there are going to be some parts you're going to be like, wait a second, things are missing. If they are, it could be because they're super massive and the scaling is wrong. What Clone Tools is actually doing is that it's actually way smaller. It's like 1% of the size. So certain things that are in here in your scene collection, but you just can't see them, go ahead and change them to 0.01. Bam, there it is. Another issue is his eyebrows are missing, and if we actually go, his eyebrows are not imported. So in that case, then we could just manually bring them in. The way to do that is just open up the zip files that you have for the specific parts that are missing, copy them over into your project, and just replace the armature. I'll just take the pants, for example. These plants, blip them out of existence. All right. So here we've opened up the oversized jogger files. So it's connected to an armature and there's nothing else here. This is just strictly the pants. So what we'll do is we'll go in here and we'll select the object, select hierarchy, Control C to copy. And now we will go over to our main guy over here and just paste him in. So it looks like everything's all fine and dandy, but actually what's happening is that there's two different armatures now, and we need to figure out how to join them up. We're going to shift and parent it to this bone. We are also going to drag it down in here as well. And then we're going to isolate this armature. We don't need it no more. We're going to delete the hierarchy. And you're like, the pants aren't here, but remember they're scaled at 1 instead of 0.01. So we are going to go into the oversized joggers and just type in 0.01 and everything should be good. We could just go to this wrench here and select the modifier and make sure it's selected to the correct armature, which is Genesis 8-1 male. They shouldn't have any 001 or 002. If there are, you should get rid of them. Let's go through the process that we did. And just to make sure everything is all working, go to pose mode and start posing. And as long as it's not disconnected from your avatar and it's actually all good, we are fine. So the next thing that we need to do is that the VRM pose has a little bit of wide stance. If you're not doing full motion capture and you're fine with just sitting under the desk, you can skip this step. But if you are going to do full body capture, you're going to want to check this out. The stance is a little bit wide. So when we pass animation through it in BUNSHIN Live, the character is always going to have a bit of a wide stance. Let's just make sure we're in object mode, click on the armature, and then we're going to click on this green running guy, go into viewport display and click in front so we actually see what's going on. Now we can go into pose mode and let's click the -Y so that we have a front orthogonal view. Press R and we're going to make it so that the legs are pointing directly down as opposed to being at an angle. That looks about right. So then go back to object mode and now that tweak to get like the wide stance is fine. You could turn off the viewport display if you want to. Next up, we are going to go into a bit of a shading. When you import into BUNSHIN Live, and if you look like your materials are all janked up, it's probably because of this issue and you might have skipped it. Something specific to BUNSHIN Live is that it basically replaces all the materials on import. And one of the issues that messes it up is if you have duplicate materials for something that should have one material for an object. Let me explain. So here we have a left and right material for the eyes. And what we're going to want to do is find the one for, let's go into this red orb here to bring up the material and delete either left or right. It doesn't really matter. And then once you've lost that material, you're going to replace it back with the one that you want it for, which is eye right or eye left. So once you know that the other materials are gone, that's fine. So when you do import in BUNSHIN Live and it seems like the materials are attached to the wrong part of the body, very likely this is the culprit. So the next thing that we need to do is cover blend shapes, or in Blender, they call them shape keys. So in object mode, choose your head here, make sure it's highlighted, then go to the upside down green triangle. And you're going to see a huge list of a bunch of stuff like jaw open. These are all the controls that control your facial animations. So let me just take jaw open, bring up the value. This is what BUNSHIN Live is driving its animation off of. Depending on the clone, the naming changes. What we're going to want to do is standardize everything. And going one by one is a nightmare. So what I ended up doing was writing a script to help you do that. In the documentation over here, you are under step C, you're going to have a blend shape rename script, bunshin.py. This is a Python script to help you do that. Once you download it, just go to the script. It could be in your downloads folder. In my case, I have saved it to Blender scripts here. Open it. And if anyone's curious, basically it's searching for all the things on the left because regardless of what clone you have, all of these names are somewhere within that string of text. And it's just replacing it with the standardized ARKit naming. So once it's loaded and it looks like this in your scripting tab, if you don't have a scripting tab, just add the plus sign to add workspace and go to scripting and you'll get this tab in here. Press the folder, load in the file, and then just press the play button. Now, if we go back to the model, you should see all of your shape keys without weird periods or blend shape 1, blend shape M, blend shape F or something. It should all be standardized to a single name. Great. So what's cool about the script is that it's not just looking for shape keys within your face. If you already have eyebrows, eyelashes, stuff like that, it'll rename all of those as well so that everything is standardized. This is specific to clones that have robot eyelashes, for example, is that they don't have blend shapes or shape keys. So when you try to animate them, they might not move. If you do have those and you want them, actually make them yourself. If it's the robot eyebrows, for example, or eyelashes, you can swap them in and out, doing the same process like you did with the pants that we did earlier. If you have the eyebrows and you want the robot eyebrows, and if you're an early tester, I have some that I manually made by hand as well, so I'll show you this kind of working. If you want these, just reach out and I should be able to hook you up and get it so that you have good facial animation in your build. So continuing on with the shader side, one thing we're going to want to do if you do have a robo skin is go into shading. Again, if you don't have it, just go into plus and find the shading and you'll have this tab here. Select your head and it should show you the material. Now, the issue with the robo heads is that the default values are a little bit low when it comes to getting that look to be just right in your PFP and making it look the same in Bunching Live. So a trick there is if you have like a robot skin, for example, disconnect the metallic here and then manually set it up high to something like 0.8. What we'll do is export the default and then another with the adjusted metallic to around zero point 0.8, and I'll show you the difference. Otherwise, if you follow along so far, we're good to export. If you've wondered why there isn't stuff in the background, let's go to Clone Converter. The only thing that we really need from here is to press Do All Scene Optimizations. This will get rid of all of the background and lights. I've already done it through here, so that's why there's an empty scene and only the character. Once you do that, you are going to want to just press Export as VRM. It might ask you to load a bone assignment file. It's the file that comes in the directory where you download Clone Converter. So make sure you download that and save it somewhere as well. Make sure it loads the file, and then you'll get to this scene. And then you can just export out the files. And those VRMs are going to be ready for you to just import into Bunshin Live. So we'll do that next. All right, so now that we're in Bunshin Live, we're going to just press initialize and start up Bunshin Live. Get all of the great PBR physically based rendering and the shininess. We're going to want to choose GLTF, VRM import. And first, we're going to start with the one where we didn't change values for the skin. So once it's loaded in, it should look something like this. On a side note, if you close your eyes, you see that odd line, which is basically supposed to be the double eyelid. Stretches. So what I tend to do is just go ahead and take that Blender. I export the PNG for the texture. I will just erase that out with context aware or just, etch the color around it and get rid of it. It looks a lot better when you're doing a lot of blinking in expressions. It looks a little odd sometimes, but that could be based on personal preference. Then let's load in the other version where we tweak the metallic value of the head geometry, and you should be able to see a stark difference here. So now that it's loaded in, it's closer to the PFP amount where it's playing more with the light. It's got a little bit of like a plastic aluminum kind of look around it. You could play with roughness. You could play with the metallic. If you want to make it look really shiny, like almost mirror-like, you could just disconnect the roughness and bring that down closer to 0. The cool thing is you can mess around with materials in Blender, bring it in here, and it'll look pretty good. So one last thing is some parts of your clone might end up looking white, like the eyelashes here, where they should be another color. So in that case, which is no material or texture finding that object. So a workaround I did for these eyelashes is just to copy a similar material that's already in the Blender file. Like, for example, I took the material for the eyebrows and then just assign them to the eyelashes. Once you do that, you should get an outcome kind of like this, where just assign them, swap them instead of making your whole entire material from scratch. An example of playing around with the materials is this character right here. This was playing around with lowering the roughness value and increasing the metallic to give it a kind of dark chrome effect on the character. But there's a lot of stuff that you could experiment with once you start digging into Blender and modifying your base character. Before wrapping this up, shout out again to Beb Regis for making Clone Tools 2.0, which make this process way easier. Shout out to MetaMike for letting me use his clone for this conversion video. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. Thanks for watching the walkthrough. Really excited to see what you guys make.